And we are live.
Okay, so right off the bat, I just want to point out that right before we went live, Derek said, "Everybody keep it quiet," and within 5 seconds, Zach slams his can of soda on the table.
I did say that I had our audio muted, so we're good.
Oh no, I know we're good. I found that wildly hilarious for some reason.
It's fine.
He just zero fucks given. He's like, whatever. I don't even.
It's fine.
Welcome everybody to episode 126 of SDGC. As always, I'm one of your hosts, John, aka Mr. Megadev on Twitter. And tonight we're joined by Zach. What's up, man?
Hey guys.
Finn is back. Finn, we're always happy to have you back.
Thank you.
And
it felt like a good episode to come back, you know?
Yeah.
This is appropriate.
You made a good choice.
And Derek, who's running the stream tonight, so hopefully there won't be any drops.
Yeah, what's going on, guys?
That stable internet out in the city, you know, or at least more. You're more civilized than I am, dude. I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And we have a very special guest tonight. I'm really excited about this. We got him on short notice. The lead quest designer for Assassin's Creed Odyssey with Ubisoft, Nikolas Kolm. Nicholas or Nick? What do you prefer?
You know what? Just whatever suits you guys best. I'm used to everything by now.
Okay. Wait, you haven't been with us yet, so you're not used to everything yet.
We'll see if I get something new.
So, Nicholas, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us, man. I know you must be busy, and this means a lot to us.
Of course, no problem.
So right off the bat, Nicholas, for anybody in chat who may not know a little bit of, a little bit about you, could you kind of explain where you came from and kind of what you do in regards to game design at Ubisoft?
Yeah, of course. So, like you said, I'm Nikolas Kolm. I'm actually one of the lead quest designers on Assassin's Creed Odyssey, since we had multiple, because it's a big game. Okay. It's a big game, as some people have pointed out. And what do I do? So, I design and implement quests and lead a team that basically does all that. The reason I'm doing that at Ubisoft is expertise that I gathered before. I work in the industry for a good 7 years now. Previously worked on a little indie title called Witcher 3.
I've never heard of that.
One more time, what was it called?
It's like nobody knows about it. It's like
I've never heard of this game.
Yeah,
completely. But yeah, so that was my second job in the industry. Actually, I started out in a little studio in Germany called Black Forest Games, aka Spellbound, after graduating from game design college. And after CD Projekt, moved over to Canada again, to the Canadian shores, and joined Ubisoft for this project, and have been with it for over 2 years now.
Wow.
Nicholas,
awesome.
Random throwback. Were you at Black Forest during the Rogue Stormers era?
Yes. Well, just before I left, actually. Sort of, it started up when I was about to leave, basically. So Rogue Stormers was back then still known as Diesel Stormers, before Diesel Jeans came along and said, nope, you can't call it that.
What?
funny little thing. Diesel Jeans thought it like there could be brand problems if a tiny little indie video game calls themselves Diesel Storms. Anyway, that's the
It wasn't Scrolls Stormers.
No, well,
yeah.
So, Nicholas, I have a quick question. How did you find your way onto the Assassin's Creed Odyssey team?
Actually, I was found. So one of the international Ubisoft recruiters contacted me while I was still at CD Projekt. Back then, though, I told her basically, nope, I always finish what I start. So then when it came time for me to change position, I reached out again and said, hey, now I'm available. And they were like, yep, we still have stuff available for you. And a couple of talks later, a couple of interviews later, and here I am.
And I'll tell you what, the reception for Assassin's Creed, I mean, people are calling this the best Assassin's Creed since 2. So the reception for the game has been fantastic.
And by people, he means me.
Well, hell, everybody, man. Like everybody is just head over heels about this game. There are compared. So, and what's really interesting is that I have heard it compared to, like somebody on Twitter the other day said it's Skyrim but good, and I was like, wow, like,
Wow.
Again,
not that there's anything wrong with Skyrim, but
That's spicy.
I don't. I love Skyrim. I've put like 500 hours into Skyrim, but this game was described as the natural evolution of that style of open world game, which I thought was incredibly interesting and not traditionally what you think about when you think of an Assassin's Creed game, right?
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah, so I thought that was fascinating. We do have a few questions about the design process, Nicholas. That went
Just a few.
Just a few. You know, you've seen them. You know, you've seen them.
Yeah.
So the way we'll do this is everybody's got the questions up. You don't have to ask them in any particular order, guys. But just pick a question next to your name and go, and we will start with Zach.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one is a little bit broad. So if you can't answer it, just pick an angle. So obviously, Origins just came out last year, and different teams worked on it at each game. But how do you take positive feedback from a game like Origins, which was also really well received, and implement that into Odyssey in a way that in such a quick turnaround?
So like you already mentioned, the two teams were working basically in tandem for a long period of time before Origins came out. So there's a lot of communication going on between the studios. They talk basically all the time. And one of the nice things is that there's always playtests being done before release. And those playtests give insights. They give especially insights on things that one team might realize as they continue into production, into a stage where maybe something comes up that they would have liked to change but can't anymore because of time constraints.
Sure.
And then we get this feedback as well, so we learn from that as well. And then, I mean, we did have an additional year after Origins came out. So as much as we could, obviously, we looked at how was it received, what was well received, what was not so well received, what can we improve on that at this stage in the project still.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
God, this is already so cool. I'm loving this. This is dope. I love learning about how the sausage is made. Like, this is just, this is so cool.
The other side of the coin is just a fascinating look every time.
Especially when you, like, somebody like me who's just so dumb on the developer side of things. You know, like, I'm not dumb. I'm dumb on the developer side of things, guys. Come on.
To be fair, I always very often feel like it would be nice if there was more like more people would have more interest in how things were actually done, and on the flip side also there would be more podcasts like these and interviews and articles and so on. I mean, there is a ton of information out there, but you have to look for it. You have to really actively look for it to find it, to get more of an insight into how things are actually done.
Right.
So I just want to point out real quick, the box quote for SDGC, we're going to include, there should be more podcasts like this. Like that's definitely going to be a thing.
All right.
Zach, I didn't mean to cut you off, Zach. Go ahead.
Bold letters.
No, I was just gonna say, just kind of reiterating what Nicholas was saying. I remember up around the time of Horizon Zero Dawn, another big third-person game that was well received, like Odyssey. People were amazed by a developer revealing how frustum culling works, and people were like, and half the reception was like, "This is so cool." The other half was like, "How did you not know how this works?" So yeah, it's always fascinating to get a look at it. Finn, you should ask another question, buddy.
Yeah,
I will. So with so many different teams working on different titles in the franchise, how much effort, how much work does it really take to keep that consistency of the franchise while still allowing you and the others their own freedom to influence their own entry with their own ideas?
That's actually pretty straightforward, because there is a thing called editorial, which is essentially the boss of everything. Like, they are the keepers of the vision of what the company wants to put out there. Within that, different studios can, whenever they get the mandate to do an Assassin's Creed, for example, they will pitch ideas of what they want to do, what they would like to do, and it goes through various stages of productions. And whenever it reaches one of those stages or end of one of those stages of production, it'll go to editorial, and they will check, is this what we want? Is it in line with what the other teams are already working on? Of course, there's also, like I said earlier, there's always cross-communication between the studios. So especially if you're working in the same franchise, there's almost never a way that the other studio will not know what you are doing, and they talk with each other and see where things could be taken next, basically.
So it sounds like just like the right hand is almost always communicating with the left hand.
Almost always, yeah. It's necessary, otherwise it would get.
So there's just like a giant Ubisoft Slack group.
It's actually just Eve just looking at all of them. Yeah.
Why don't we what was that, Finn? I'm sorry.
I was gonna say why not let Derek take a stab at it?
I was just gonna pass it over to Derek.
Oh man. So Assassin's Creed Origins made some really huge steps away from what people considered kind of the traditional Assassin's Creed formula. And then Odyssey has evolved even further on that. There's a lot of major changes, like, the idea of being able to have like unique character playthroughs, dialogue trees is something new to Assassin's Creed Odyssey from the rest of the franchise. Is this something, to your knowledge, that has been kind of eyed for a while behind the scenes with Assassin's Creed, or if not, like, what caused that to come about for this game specifically?
So since I wasn't there at the very beginning of the project,
yeah.
what I do know is that the decision on how to progress with the new Assassin's Creed games was made in tandem with the Origins team. So the idea was always Origins is going to start off this process of moving it more into this RPG direction. They changed up the combat drastically. They added a different structure to it, more open world, and so on and so forth. And as they were communicating this to us, and as they were having these conversations, it was then on us to say, all right, so this is what they're doing, and now we're going to pick it up from there. So the decision was made before Origins, not long before, but quite a bit before that. Games take a long time to make, right? And so yeah, it needed a little bit of time, and that was also one of the reasons why we had the break in between, to sort of get that creative energy flowing again. It's like, where do we want to take this? Where should it go?
Break very well used.
Yeah,
for sure. Nikolas, are you sure that games take a long time to make? Because every Collins College School of Design every commercial I've ever seen of theirs tells me, man, where should this sound go? I can't believe we're getting paid to make these games.
Tighten up the graphics on level 3.
I was waiting for that.
As a proud owner of RPG Maker, I can tell you that it's really no big deal.
No, it's simple, basically.
Every now and then I could just see Nikolas like sending a text message to a friend. Can you believe we get paid to do this? Unbelievable. All right, so Nikolas, I got a question if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So I'm curious, what lessons did you take from your work on quest design in The Witcher 3? And this is me being ignorant, assuming that's what you did on The Witcher 3. And how or were you able to apply the lessons there to Odyssey's overall quest design?
So yes, first of all, yes, I was able to take lessons, and yes, I was a quest designer.
Got it right.
On Witcher 3. And one, I think the most important lesson that I took along with me is that choices don't always have to be big to be impactful. So a lot of the times, things players will remember, and I've noticed this, like, I've been watching people play through Witcher 3 for a long time. I'm now watching people play through Odyssey, dropping into streams and everything. Mm-hmm. A lot of the moments players appreciate, players really like get excited over, is things that are not necessarily like, like the big choices, like
Yeah.
Do I kill this guy or do I spare this guy? Do I like condemn this faction or do I save Aiden or do I save Ashley? So those are big choices, and they have their place, obviously, in my opinion, and I like them as well. But one of the things that Witcher 3 taught me was that a story can be interesting if you only have small choices, personal choices, very personal choices that are sort of localized to that particular quest line, that play out over a couple of episodes, as you will, a couple of quests, and have an impact on the ending of that is not necessarily world changing, but it changes things for the character. Those were some of the most memorable quests in Witcher 3. I've been interviewed before about one of those, and I'm sure I've already read a lot of comments about those particular types of quests in Odyssey as well.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, Nicholas, because I have maintained several times that the Bloody Baron side quest in Witcher 3 is one of the finest side quests in any game I've ever played. It could have been its own contained experience, and to see you, it's interesting to see you take the lessons learned from there and apply them to something else that. I'm not sure. Would you say that Odyssey, as far as scope goes, is actually bigger than Witcher 3?
As far as overall scope goes, probably, just because of the massive amount of various systems we have in there that were just not present. Like, we didn't have conquest battles, we didn't have a mercenary system, we didn't have a cultist system, and I'm not sure, but I'd have to ask a world designer how big the worlds actually are comparatively. We didn't have, we didn't have a ship that you could drive. Well, we did have a ship, but it was, it wasn't really
a little guy.
It was just more of a boat.
Right.
It's a glorified dinghy, really.
Yes. So just based on that, yes. But of course, that's not necessarily for me necessarily. For quest side, I could apply a lot of the lessons learned there and take them along. So that was just good.
That's so that's so cool to hear. Zach, I'm gonna pass the mic back to you, Zach.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this might show some ignorance in the consumer side of understanding how games are made, because I know it's not like you build a quest and then move to the next quest that's in the narrative. But when you first go from presumably storyboarding a quest line, and then it's in its playable state, how long does that usually take? Can it take like the full breadth of development until everything really snaps into place?
You know what? I don't really think I can
Okay.
give you an estimate of hours. No, just because like it's what do you define playable? Like, there's a first playable version that there's a first playable version that comes along at some point in the development process, which is pretty early. That's usually after maybe, like, depending on the size of the quest, between 2 days, maybe a week, that it takes you to from concept to implementation in the first implementation in the engine. But then, like, if you want to call it like actually playable for a player, for a consumer, now that's a completely different beast, because then you involve all the other departments. Everybody has to put their stuff in there, because at the end of the day, a quest designer, I like to think of quest design as sort of a creative director for that particular chunk of content.
Right.
Because you take everything that everybody else does and you put it into the game in a way that it creates the experience that you want to relay to the player.
Right.
So you have to communicate with everybody. You have to communicate with every possible department in the studio and make sure that everything comes together in the end. And that, I'm going to say, there were quests that I started at the very beginning of the production and that I worked on until the very end of production. So.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thanks. I know that was kind of it's a hard one to.
All good.
Okay.
Zach likes to throw the zingers. Zach comes in hot with the zingers.
Mm.
I hope that clarified it a little bit.
Yeah, it did clarify. Yeah.
Why don't we go back to Finn?
All right. Well, this is a personal question for Nicholas. So, were there any quests that you personally wanted but that did not make the cut?
Oh,
that's a good one.
Ones. Let's see. Yes. First of all, yes, and that's always the case. I don't think there's any game out there where there's not at least some content that somebody wanted in the game that didn't make the final cut. It's kind of in the nature of game development, unfortunately. Yeah. In this particular case, I wouldn't necessarily call it quests in particular. I would say branches of quests. There were a couple of branches that I would have liked to include, but where at the end of the day we ran out of time in terms of because unfortunately with a game like this, it all means it also needs to be voice recorded. You have to bring in the actors into the studio. You have to like get the cinematics team on there and so on and so forth. So a couple of the branches I would have liked to include did not make it into the final game, sadly. But I think most of the stuff that I really wanted in there actually made it, and a couple of things that I was afraid would not make it actually did make it in the end.
Oh, that's good. That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you like? Excuse me. Like I'm unfamiliar with how this works. So like, choice is it ultimately, and this is just kind of a springboard off of Finn's question. Whose choice is it ultimately as to what branch or what branching paths go in there and what's cut?
Ultimately, it's up to the creative director.
Okay, all right. Okay.
So he's the end all and be all. There's various steps, obviously. So I can say some of the stuff won't make it into the game when my juniors or regular quest designers come up and want to put something in. I can say that doesn't make it. But then some of the stuff I would, I say, yeah, no, don't go and try that. But then the director comes in and says, nope, that won't make the cut.
Awesome. No, that's perfect. That's perfect, man. Derek, why don't you fire a question?
Yeah, man. So, how intertwined are you with I'm sure it's not like a writing team explicitly in those terms, but, when it comes to like quest design, you think about how these side quests interact with the story itself. Like, how do you work within the writing of the side quest to make it not feel like you're putting the entire game on a halt to go do this story? How do you make that feel organic in the process of being taken a piece at a time as you play through, or stop for somebody to marathon side quests and not feel too removed, I guess, from the world?
So first of all, we are ridiculously embedded with the narrative team, script writers. So basically, we're best buddies. We sit together and everything. Because at the end of the day, we both sort of do the same thing. We create the narrative for the game. The quest designer puts the narrative into the engine. The script writer writes the words that create that experience. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's a combined effort of both of those teams to make sure that branches from the main path, for example, are at the moments where it makes sense for the story. Like, is there a slight lull? Like, did we just come off a huge exciting moment, or are like one of the worst things possible? Like you're moving up and like, oh, around the next corner there's a huge boss fight, or like this super dramatic moment. It's like decisive, and then Socrates comes along and says, by the way, like you can't obviously really do that. Nobody would want to do that. So you sort of like have the overview over the overall story, and then you find those hook points where you can say, all right, this is a point where we can send the player off, do something else. And also very often to just see, okay, so this main path quest sends the player to this area. I'm going to put a quest quiver in that area so that when the player gets there, completes that main path quest, he sees, oh, look, there's an exclamation mark. I can maybe check that out. So it's a bit, it's sort of enticing the player to go to different ways.
Nikolas, we actually have a message in chat from Sam Tolbert. Just want to say thank you so much for helping to make my favorite game this generation.
Oh, thank you. That's cool. So nice.
That's awesome to hear.
It's a genuine moment of joy right there. That's what we live for, guys.
Yeah, like somebody gift that. That's a genuine. They don't happen on this podcast. Genuine joy is a rarity on this podcast. It's mostly just us sitting around and being miserable and arguing with each other.
Positive.
So I will jump in with a question. And this is something that has kind of been on my mind ever since I started playing open world games. Like, I've always wanted to ask somebody involved in this. As someone, so I'm unfamiliar with the process of brainstorming games. So was Odyssey's open world built with its quest structure in mind, or are those retrofitted into the world after it's been conceptualized?
So with Odyssey, with any Assassin's Creed game, actually, you always have to remember that they take place in actual places. So, it is ancient Greece. There is things we just can't we can't just put Athens in a different location, or we can't just say, oh, Athens is now on top of a mountain, or whatever might be the case. So in Assassin's Creed games, the world is, well, I mean, it's already here. It's our world, so it's created first, and then the quests fit into that. There is, of course, also the flip side where details in the world will be adjusted based on the quests. Then, so like we will say we need a bandit encampment over here, or we need a temple, or any kind of point of interest over here. We need something. We need a fight arena in this particular area. So we communicate that to the world team, and they accommodate us as good as they can within that limitation that it still needs to be based on the actual map of the Greek world, and only adjust that, well, as little as possible. So I mean, it's still a game, and fun comes first. So there are concessions that are being made to that, but at the end of the day, that's the main drive, and then the quests are being put in there, and then when it comes into the details, that's when we get to say we need this or.
That's really interesting, Nicholas. It sounds like, due to the, as you said, Greece is a real place, and antiquity was a real thing. It sounds like that's actually, you're more constricted by that than you would be something like The Witcher 3, where you've got a lot more freedom to say, okay, you know what, this is a fantasy world we pulled from deep within our minds, and we can do whatever we want.
Or a book.
Yeah, in a way, yes, but in a way also no. If you're still limited, even in The Witcher, at least if you want to make it a believable world too, it has to feel real. It has to feel like, yes, this is a place people could live. So that limitation you will always, well, unless you go completely ridiculously fantasy, you will have. However, it is restricting in a way, but that also makes you think of more creative solutions to things. And then at the end of the day, it also leads you to explore, like, okay, so, why is this particular town here? Okay, it's because the geography was particularly beneficial to settlement here. So what can we make out of that? Like, is there something in the geography we can use to maybe give the player a plot hook? Jesus Christ, sorry.
We've had far worse.
Is there anything we can do to tell a story that is part of the world, as it were? And so that gives you a different approach to it, I would say. Restrictive in a way, but also makes you think differently, I guess, which is interesting.
That's fascinating. Thank you, Nicholas. Derek, back to, or no, I'm sorry. Actually, it's Zach. Zach, we're back to you now.
Yeah. So this question's a quick two-parter. And you've already touched on one half. So when you are working on side quests and also main quests, how do you handle like you were saying, how you have different things in scale, and you kind of want, if you have a really high point in a narrative, sometimes it's okay to give low point in side quests where like things are a little bit more calm than they are at certain climactic moments. How do you kind of balance that in a way where people are getting a nice break, but then it doesn't suddenly become like, oh, I'm in a slog now. I'm just, you know what I mean? Like, how do you kind of,
well, mostly we think of every side quest, almost every quest sort of is supposed to tell a story. Sometimes, obviously, you can't tell one story in just one quest, in which case you go on to quest chains, which is in Odyssey particular. The character quests are examples of that. But even then, each quest should have a sort of an arc to it.
Sure.
And then you get to sort of thinking about pacing a little bit. Because, like you said, you don't want to turn it into a slog, but at the same time, you want to keep the player engaged. Sometimes you will want to have a bit of time in between segments of a quest or in between parts of a quest chain, which is often, especially with character quests, can be the case, because sometimes you will not want to have the next quest in a quest chain because something tragic just happened in the previous quest, and it doesn't really make sense narratively that the character would jump just into the next adventure. How do we balance that? Honestly, it's a bit of a miracle, really.
Okay. Which is really like all games, it feels like.
A little bit, yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's really you get a feel for it. One of the main
Okay.
things that we do a lot is playtesting our own stuff. So because we put quests into the game as early as we possibly can, so that we can actually play them in the world. One of the things, paper designing quests is great, but a lot of quests on paper won't turn out in the game because actually trying to play them feels very different every single time. So playing through them and then seeing how they feel when they come off the main path, when they, or when they are embedded in the world, that helps a lot. So this is why we, especially during main production time, we would have play sessions of areas either bi-weekly or sometimes even daily, because we needed to know what is going on with the other quests. How does our stuff fit in with the other stuff that is being made by other people?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just I have my quick part 2, guys. Do we have enough time for me to do that really quick?
Yeah, no, go.
Yeah.
Okay, so my quick part 2 is that it's one of my favorite things in Odyssey. I love the new exploration mode for finding quests.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a decision made early on, just like, oh, this is a new pillar we want to introduce, or is this part of that pacing thing where like it can produce more highs and lows while you go from point to point?
A little bit of both, but the decision was made early on.
Okay.
The decision to bring that system into the game was one of our game directors' big plans for the game early on. It was actually even less guided for a long time, until it turned out that players really couldn't find stuff.
Okay. Then you had to bring in
and then you make concessions sort of back and forth, try out different approaches, and then eventually we landed on this for this game. I think there's ways we can still push that forward when we're going into the next year, whenever that might be. No clue. But yeah, it was a plan from the beginning, but then it also helped with certain pacing situations and quests. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Seriously, it is such, like, when it's first presented early in the game, it feels like it's a minute difference, and then like when you're actually in it, especially the early quests that really hit it home, I love that addition. It's great.
That's good to hear.
And we will kick it back up to Finn. Oh, and by the way, just so we're hitting the home stretch here, we probably got time for one more question, Finn, and then we are going to jump into the reader submitted questions.
Okay.
Yep.
So, good sir, if you may.
Why don't I get that level of respect? This is like I started this podcast.
Like, make a couple of my favorite games, I guess.
That's why you started this podcast.
What would you say makes the quests in Assassin's Creed Odyssey stand out, both against other games in the series and also your contemporaries in the genre of open world awesomeness?
Well, in terms of in the series, the obvious answer is we have choice and consequence to a degree in our game. So that was always from the beginning one of the things we kept in mind when designing quests. We wanted choices. We wanted to have consequences, which is a lot of fun. I think another thing that makes them stand out, which I've happily also seen that players really appreciated, is that it's less linear in a way that you can do quests before you even accept them. So sometimes you will clear out a bandit camp and then you go to a quest giver and the quest giver will say, I have to deal with these bandits every day. And then you say, what? You mean the bandits over there? I dealt with them. It's all good. And then the quest is over. Which is fun, which is nice. It's just, it makes you feel a little more connected to the world, makes it all feel a little more involved. And because it's an open world game, it'll give you a little freedom in approach a situation. Lets you get a little more creative with how you approach a fort, how you approach an enemy, how you approach any given situation, really. So those are the ways that I think it differs from previous entries in the series. Less so from Origins because they already pushed in that direction, but then adding in the choices and consequences and the making things happen before things, what I think would make that stand out. In terms of, in comparison to other games, I think one of the things that I was really happy about and that I feel like makes a drastic difference is we're actually funny sometimes. We have, I mean, I'm not saying no other game is funny, obviously, but we have intentionally put a lot of humor into the game. Funny little moments that you wouldn't really expect from a franchise that's all about killing people. But we and I was really the narrative director when Mel told me about that she wanted to go that direction, and we really, like, I know I tried really hard to get a lot of funny moments into the game. So yeah, the humor is one thing that I think stands out a little bit. And then obviously what is always nice about an Assassin's Creed game is also learning about historical figures and the actual setting itself. So a lot of the quests are rooted in either myth or legend from of the Greeks. They're also rooted in lifestyle and different things that we know about that world that our historian that worked with us locally helped us a lot. Like whenever we pitched an idea for a quest, like, oh, we want to do this, what do you think? And then she's like, yeah, this would not really work in that world, so on and so forth. But you learn a lot just by playing through it. You learn a little bit about how people lived back then, how they saw things, why did they believe in gods, so on and so forth. And then obviously also talking to Socrates, such a joy. But also to any of the other, we tried to be accurate to what we know about them as much as we could, obviously with some creative liberties in order to make the story happen appropriately. But yeah, I think that is one of the really amazing things for me as well. Like designing it and making it happen was just awesome.
Well, and that's something that a guy like me can appreciate. I love history, and I'm a student of antiquity. And I love that time period, and to actually see things tackled seriously. Like for example, the Battle of Thermopylae that you have not seen tackled in games before, at least in a serious manner, is just really refreshing and cool. And that's one of the great things about the Assassin's Creed series.
Yeah,
is seeing those time periods and those battles, those characters that you normally wouldn't ever see in another game.
And then the last thing that I'll say about that is it has been announced that we're going to also have the Discovery Tour back for Odyssey. So, and that is like just the next step with that, because of course I love playing the game and experiencing like that, but then add on top of that this discovery mode is I think it's an amazing thing for everybody to just experience a culture like that.
Absolutely.
We're going to jump into just a couple of fan questions here, and I'll just jump in with the first one. At Gas in the Hole from Twitter asks, what was your favorite quest you had the pleasure of working on or designing? Anything particularly outstanding to you?
So one of my favorites, I would say there's two. One being the Blood Fever quest on the very first island. If anybody has already seen that, was one of my favorites. And then I had the pleasure of working on the Silver Islands, they were called, which was also the area that was showcased at E3. And so I worked on that area with my team, and I think that is one of the things I'm really proud of. One of the quest chains and just section of content that I'm really, really happy with. So those two would stand out to me.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikolas. Derek, why don't you grab a fan question and throw it out there?
All right. I'm gonna grab the softball one because I like this question though. So this is I think this one's easy, but I gotta ask anyway.
Make sure you shout out who asked it too.
Yeah, this one is Witty Mitty, who's actually in chat and is one of our regulars. So Alexios or Cassandra?
Cassandra.
Yeah.
There you go. There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
That's I there's nothing against Alexios. He's great and everything, but I fell in love with Cassandra's biceps, and
Yes.
Yeah.
So did half the chat.
I've seen multiple messages in chat. Like Dio said, tell him thank you for giving Cassandra those guns.
Yeah, and like I wanted to mention this earlier when you're talking about humor, but the voice, I mean, and this isn't a knock against the Alexios voice actor, but Cassandra's voice actor is funny when she needs to be, but also tough as shit when she needs. Like the voice acting for her is just sublime.
Yeah,
Love it.
Melissa did an amazing job with Cassandra. I can't like I was just blown away when I heard her the first time, and and have been happy ever since.
Yeah, it's incredible.
You know, Cassandra, I'm pretty sure you're a cop.
Zach, why don't you grab a question?
Yeah, sure. So
We passed Finn, I think.
Oh, did we pass Finn? Did we pass
give
Finn?
it to Finn. Give it to Finn.
Pass Finn right as his camera clears up. Come on, guys.
Nah, I'm good. No, okay. So this one comes from I feel like this is appropriate going to Ginger Effect. This is from Ginger Dome 81.
Oh, all right.
Oh, look at this.
Ginger brother here.
Representing the underserved. The side quests actually seem to have purpose and meaning behind them beyond just the stalk this, bring me that in previous entries. Were there any other games or genres that you used for inspiration?
Well,
Is that what you're
I
doing?
mean, I'm gonna say me personally, just based on the fact that I worked on it. Obviously, The Witcher came there as an inspiration.
I can't believe that. I can't believe it. I'm stunned.
No, I completely lost that. No, but there's that. There was, funnily enough, also a bit of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but mostly in terms of openness, how you approach situations. Obviously, we didn't go nearly as far as Zelda did in the end, but we tried to be as open as possible when you approach any given objective in a quest. And then for me personally, there is always old school BioWare quest situation. So this is mostly when it comes to choices and consequences. So to keep choices not as obvious as they might be. Mostly I'm talking about things like Knights of the Old Republic, Jade Empire, that sort of stuff. So not having a clear yes or no situation when you give the player a choice, as much as we could. And honestly, that was the main part about making a quest interesting to me anyway, is to wrap it in an interesting narrative with interesting people. Because at the end of the day, the game is the game, and you will do a certain thing because it's an Assassin's Creed game. It will probably involve killing people, or at least something similar, or recruiting them now. But how do we make it interesting? How do we make it engaging? We try to engage the character through the NPCs, through the people that care about it. So why should you care about it? Because these people care about it, and these people are actually people that you can believe actually exist, and then it all feels a lot better.
Awesome. Fantastic. Oh, this is so cool. So we're actually, I think we're bumping up against your time.
We have one more I'm sure.
Yeah, can I do one more?
Please, no,
Yeah.
Zach, by all means. I was
Okay.
hoping to say that.
Okay, so this one comes from Joseph Nope. So he says, Odyssey feels a little bit busier than Origins, and a lot of the same business you would find in Far Cry 5, where wolves will attack, or moose will run in front of you as you're playing, or a patrol will spot you. And how do you kind of go with these organic moments that happen from a quest into having these dynamic things like a quest patrolling by, or wolves attacking a camp while you're trying to do a stealth run, for example?
Probably one of the biggest challenges on this game, I'm gonna be
Okay.
honest. Because you want to tell a story with your quest, and then a goddamn wolf appears and ruins everything.
Right.
Or a chicken in our case.
Yeah, the
Because
violent
apparently
chickens.
the violent chickens.
Yeah.
But the thing is that at some point you learn to embrace it. So like basically you play with the world. So if I want to send a player to do something, can I send them in a way into the world that the systems actually work for the quest? And then
Right.
some safeguarding has to be done, especially when it comes to main path quests. So if you want the main narrative, like you can't like have a random chicken assassinate Socrates, for example. That would just be bad form.
Yeah.
So you have to make some concessions there in terms of breaking the systems. And that was, I think, what I said is one of the biggest challenges was working with the people who designed and implemented and made all those systems, and finding ways that we could put our hooks into it,
Right.
use it for the quests, but at the same time also influence those systems in a way that it actually benefited the quest in the end.
Right.
So that was one of the huge challenges on this project, and I think we managed all right. And yeah, and I think it makes overall for a lot of interesting moments that would have otherwise not.
Right, and like that's something that I think a lot of Ubisoft games have flirted with probably for like the last 10 years. Like I remember one of my big things in Far Cry 3 was you clear an outpost, but like halfway through it, there's a bear in a cage and you can just let it out.
Yeah.
And but those are when the systems are incredible, right? Like that's like because it involves player choice. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the chickens are. Yeah, it's a Zelda callback. It feels like.
It
Yeah.
really is. Well, and you know, I can relate to what you were saying, Nicholas, because I live in the middle of fucking nowhere. Like, there's nothing around me, and sometimes when I'm trying to get something done, I will have a wild creature come up and just interrupt me. Like in the morning, walking to my car, I'm like, "Oh, look, there's a coyote." Well, I guess I'm not going to my car, and then I'll have to call my boss and say, "Look, boss, it's like this. You played an open world game like Assassin's Creed or Red Dead Redemption, where a wild animal will just run up and do whatever." That's basically
That's what happens to me. Yeah.
That's what I'm living right now.
Where
And
do
I
you?
walk outside and I realize, oh, it's Florida, and I don't want to go outside. I just go back in. It's fine.
It's okay. There's alcohol inside. Everything's fine.
Exactly. Yes.
Before we let you go, Nicholas, and thank
Yes.
you, there is one more question, and don't
Okay.
worry, it's a softball, but it's very important because it lets us get to the core of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
No.
So,
No.
if you had to choose,
No. No.
heart of
Finn.
hearts,
Finn. No.
Pie.
Finn. No.
You gotta let him ask his question, John. It's okay.
All right. Fine. I'm just kidding.
if you had to choose, would you go with cake or would you go with pie?
The cake is a lie.
I mean, that is
That's
a
our
damn
answer.
good answer. That is
That's
a
our
damn
answer.
fine
This
answer.
is why this man is working on the greatest of the games.
That is probably Finn. That is probably the best answer to that question I've ever heard. That's really good. Nobody's ever said. I can't believe nobody's ever actually answered
Really?
that.
Nobody
Yeah,
ever
no,
said
that's the-
that.
No one
Everyone's
ever-
everyone's too afraid to go for
You
it.
do talk about video games on this, though.
Yes,
We
they
incessantly.
overthink it is what they do.
All right.
Yeah.
I get.
Like, that's why I love that question, because it reveals so much of you as a person,
There we go.
Mhm.
There we go.
while also not stepping on any lines that we're not supposed to cross during an interview.
Absolutely.
Works
Okay.
for us.
I also
So-
just want.
Oh, go
I just
ahead,
want-
John.
I was just gonna say, I just want to point out El Testa in chat. Friend of ours, Twitch affiliate, does a lot of good work on Mixer. Great streamer. She said earlier in the chat, I just wanted to point this out. She said, "Old Nympho Lady is my favorite thing ever." So,
Oh God. Yeah.
fantastic, fantastic way
quest.
to, fantastic way to.
But before we let you go, is there anything you would like to say or reiterate?
Actually, in regards to that old nympho lady, I just writer who wrote that quest, and he said, "I can't believe I'm going to be famous for writing an old nympho lady." But we're very happy that everybody's enjoying it so much, so that's great. Otherwise, I want to thank, first of all, you for bringing me on and having me with you on this podcast.
thank
And
you.
I also want to throw a huge shout out to the community, the Assassin's Creed community, which is incredibly passionate, incredibly knowledgeable, and oh my God, I'm
No. Of course.
That's par for the course for this podcast. If that's the worst thing that happens during this podcast, I'm fine with it. I'm fine.
So huge shout out to the community. They're great. They're do what we're doing without them, and I'm so thankful for all of their feedback, all of their criticism, sometimes harsh, sometimes really great compliments. So really happy about that. And then obviously everybody who's playing the game, I hope you have a lot of fun and as much fun as I had making it. And yeah, I hope we can continue to improve and give you better and better experiences as we go along.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so
Fantastic.
much.
Nikolas, thank you so much for joining us. I just want to point out to everybody in chat, we are going to take a 5-minute hiatus. The stream will not end. We're going to put up a little we'll be back soon graphic. Please excuse our noise. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes to continue the rest of the show. So please stand by.
All right.